Hey guys, Anthony Jolts here with Top Gun John Boats, and in this video I'm going to do a step-by-step demonstration on how I measure and cut my hatches for my John Boat build. Guys, I recently completed the rear deck rebuild of the Top Gun John Boat, so check out that playlist. It's a start to finish on the whole rear end rebuild of this boat. While I was doing that project, I set aside some time and actually went into great detail to show you how I measure and cut these hatches, and that's what this video is. So I hope that you can take something away from it, guys. While you're here, subscribe to the channel if you've yet to do so, and stay tuned for future content. And as always, may your tiny boat builds be great. Stick around until the end of the video and I'll show you a couple clips of how these hatches turned out 100% complete. People ask me all the time how I get accurate decking and hatch measurements, so I'm going to share a few things with you guys. I'm going to build my hatches out of this 11/32 plywood. That's what I originally ran in this boat. So we're going to go back with that. We're going to do runners underneath. I'm probably actually going to do 1/2 inch this time on the middle at least. Definitely going to beef up the middle hatch and make it match the thickness of the original decking. So 11/32, and then we'll do fiberglass resin on the top of it. This is 11/32 material, so it's the same material I'm going to be using for my hatches and my deck. I'm just putting these flush with this panel over here and almost flush with the side of the boat as a visual representation of kind of where I want the corner of that hatch to be. Same thing over here, and then I'm just going to pull a measurement. I like to run my hatches real tight, so I give myself 1/8 of an inch on each side of a hatch, because your carpet's going to overlap 1/8 of an inch on this hatch and 1/8 of an inch on this hatch. So you just got to think ahead, but I'm going to kind of draw out a map and I'll share that with you guys. Probably what I'll do is I'll cut the overall measurement, and none of this is square, but I'll cut the overall measurement, and then I'll come back and I'll cut my hatch here, and I'll cut my hatch here, put a block here tight, put a block here tight, pulled my measurement across. It was 38.25. Next, got a block here, pulling across here, checking my measurement. Same thing over here, checking my measurement. And because of this transom, there are a few variances, as you can see. I'm 19 5/8 on this side, 19.5 over here. We'll find out from corner to corner here now where I'm at. Okay, now I'm measuring these measurements tight. I don't know if I mentioned that. You're going to take off a little bit of material in the end. You'd rather have your pieces a little bit bigger than too small. So I'm measuring these tight, and then I'm going to adjust for my carpet after the fact. So what I've got is 14 3/8 on one side, 13 7/8 on the other. So we're off about 1/2 inch from this side to this side. It could be in the boat. It could be in a lot of different things. No big deal. That's why we measure. I'm going to check where I'm at center, and then kind of figure out where my breaks need to be for my hatches, and continue with my outline. Okay, I found center. It's 25.5. I butted my plywood to the hole. Okay, hook my tape. Butted my plywood to the hole. Hook my tape. Did the math, found center, 25.5. Checked it both ways, 25.5. Now, from this point, I know this is dead center. I can measure out, okay, to the middle of this. Measure out to the middle of this. I found center on the back. Measure out. Measure out. Basically, when this thing is off and measurements aren't right and you got a curve of a hole, the only thing I know that's true is this box that I built in the center. So I'm going to go off that. I know the box is centered, and I know I got the center of my boat, so I'm going to go off that for my other hatch measurements. There's a lot of ways to do this, guys, but this is just the way I know and how I feel comfortable doing it. All right, so my situation is different from most people's in the fact that I'm not cutting square hatches over here, square and square. The middles be a rectangle. This has a taper. This kind of has a taper on the transom, and then I've got this angle here that I'm going to have to cut. Basically, I've made me a map of the overall dimensions for the most part. Not every single measurement, but what I've come to learn is I've got a couple things off, but that's okay. I'm going to correct them. My widest measurement is 51 inches and then 14 3/8. So I'm going to start by just cutting a square rectangle by 51 and then 14 3/8. Then I'm going to move on to my center hatch, which is roughly 27 by 19 5/8. And I'm going to cut it out. With the 2 drops left over, I'm going to fine tune those tapers and get all those angles correct and cut those individually. Then once all 3 parts are cut, I'll set them in here and I'll make adjustments as far as ripping material off the edges to account for the carpet. I hope that makes sense. Follow along. And this is why they say measure twice, cut once. When I said 14 3/8 by 51, I was actually wrong. So I checked my measurements again because something didn't look right. And it is actually 20. I was reading the wrong measurement. So 20 top to bottom, 51. Those are my largest points. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that. And then we're going to fine tune things after I cut the overall rectangle. All right, before I move forward, I want to talk about the grain orientation on this plywood and how I choose to run it in my boat builds. The grain is running that way. My framing is running this way. I'm running my plywood the grain opposite of the direction of my framing. And I actually do that on purpose when I cut out my hatches. Reason being, let me explain to you. This is the top. This is the bottom. You'll notice there's 3 veneers. Top veneer, grain is running the length. Bottom veneer, the grain is running the length. Middle veneer is probably running that way. Okay, so they compact those 3 veneers together to form this plywood. 2 are running that way, 1's running that way. So your strength is going to be side to side. Okay, so if you run your plywood side to side and you run your framing front to back, it prevents flex. It may not matter if you're running like 3/4 inch or 1/2 inch, but man, I'll tell you what, with this 11/32, it really matters which direction you run it, because if you don't do the runners correctly and give it some supports correctly and frame it correctly, this stuff will warp and bend and flex and break under your feet. The way I've done it, I've never had any issues. Just testing the fitment, and that is a tight fitment, side to side. Okay, got my center hatch measured out. Hope this doesn't confuse you guys too much. Again, I'm going off center. So I know that my center is where it needs to be. So I went off center. So 13.5. 13.5, that's 27. So I'm gonna cut this center hatch, and then I'm gonna have this drop over here, and I'll have this drop over here, and then we can fine tune these crazy measurements on the side. Okay, got that cut, and I forgot the way I'm designing this, guys. My hatch is actually gonna sit right about there, and I'm gonna have a small little piece because it's gonna have hinges. It needs to flip this way. I have a small little piece back here, so I'm gonna go ahead and measure that out. I got my measurements. And I'm going to cut that. That's the center hatch. You'll notice I got nice equal reveals on both sides, centered on my framing. My center mark matches my center mark on my framing. I've got my drop. I've lined that up center. And then I've just made some marks. I'm going to take 1 1/8 out of it for the transom. And then this piece will go in behind my hatch. And then we can work on the sides. All right. Got this back piece cut. And you'll notice I left about 1/8 inch gap where it butts the back side of the transom for my carpet to have room to wrap and go under. I left me a notch for my bilge pump. Okay. And then you'll see there's a gap in between this piece and this piece. It's 1/4 inch. Okay. I don't know if you could see that, but it's right at 1/4 inch. Okay. That's what you want, because when that carpet wraps, I'm using outdoor carpet. So you want to, if you're using something different, then you need to measure your carpet, the thickness. But when this stuff wraps, it's going to add 1/8 inch to whatever hatch you have. Okay, so 1/8 inch on this hatch, wrapping this side, 1/8 inch on this panel, wrapping this side. That means my gap needs to be 1/4 inch. Now I'm tight up here still. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this through the table saw and take 1/8 inch off. And then I know that I'm going to be to size for this piece and this piece exactly how I need it. Got that exactly how I want it. I've got my 1/4 inch gap, got an 1/8 inch gap on the back side, got an 1/8 inch gap up front. This is centered. Everything's exactly how I want with my reveals over my framing. Time to go ahead and fine tune the right and left side. Okay, I've got it here. We're going to start measuring and marking. Top measurement is 11 3/4. But remember, I need 1/4 inch gap, so I'm going to take off 1/4. I'm going to mark it at 11.5. Remember, this is on an angle. So I measured down from here to here at 14 to the corner. 14, I made me a mark. Now I measured over. It's 11.5. So up there was 11 3/4. So we went in 1/4 inch. Again, I'm going to take another 1/4 inch off to give me that gap necessary for my carpet. So I'm going to mark this at 11 1/4. 14 inches down. I hope that made sense. I hope you see how this is playing out for me. See, that's my angle. That's my angle. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and get my length here. then I can measure over and measure up, and hopefully I could get this in one cut, but if not, I could shave a little bit off if I need to. Okay, so top to bottom, our measurement's going to change because remember, we took some material off from my starting material to accommodate the carpet. So since I know these panels exactly how I want them, all I'm doing is measuring from here to the top. That's 19.5. So we're going to measure 19.5 there. That'll be our hatch. That measurement at 19.5, you'll see where that changed from my initial cut. Now this, unfortunately, is at an angle. So I've measured up from this point to here, and I'm going to eyeball it. We're going to call it 19.25. So I'm going to measure down 19.25, and that's going to give me that angle. But of course, to know where I need to put this mark, to see where that angle changes, I need to start by getting this math done. So I measured over. The bottom is 5 3/4. Of course, we're going to take a quarter off for carpet, so we're going to call it 5.5. All right, so I've got top to bottom. Okay, we went over 5.5. Now remember, this needs to be at an angle. So now we're going to measure back down and connect the dots and then change this angle. And again, I measured down that 19.25. Remember, we called that 19.25. We measured over 5.5, and that's my new mark. So that should be my angle. It should be pretty close, hopefully. All right, so technically, we should be able to connect the dot from here to here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'm going to measure it and check it and make sure it is the same as this. And there it is, and that measurement is actually right at the same as this, within a 1/16. That's 7 3/4. That's 7 3/4. So this hat should actually fit. Guys, I hope all that made sense. I really have no other way to explain it besides how I just did. If it didn't, I'm sorry. I tried. Maybe go back and watch it again. I don't know. Well, I'm going to go ahead and cut this. That fits really, really good, but it's a little too tight. I need to slide the hatch over a little bit, but it's hitting this carbon fiber piece. So I'm going to take maybe a fat 1/8 of an inch off, slide it over, see if that works. I don't want this gap to be no more than 1/4, but right now it's only about 1/8. So we're just going to take some material, shave it, and slide it. You always want to be bigger than smaller. If it's bigger, you can take material off and get it to fit. If it's too small, then you'll just have gaps. I don't really like gaps. Got it shaved. I just took 1/8 of an inch over there off that angle. And we got 1/8 back here. We've got 1/4 down the middle. We've got about 1/8 here. And then over here, it's more space, but I'm lining it up with this existing one. Guys, I built my framing and my hatches to shed water on the sides. So you'll see that my framing actually has a gap there. So water can go down the sides behind the framing into the back of the boat if it gets a lot of rain. So that's just by design. But I'm cool with that. So we're going to move on to the other side. I repeated the process for this hatch that I showed you over there. Got it all marked out. Okay, got the other piece cut. And I'm happy with all the reveals. Happy how everything turned out. Of course, I'll be applying fiberglass resin to these hatches on the top sides and sanding smooth, and then carpet. And on the undersides, I'll be applying 1/2 inch runners and then painting in a oil-based paint, probably this gloss smoke gray. And then adding some hinges and getting them mounted, cutting some holes, doing some flush slam latches, and some struts on the underside. And that's it. But all those other additions are subjects for other videos and things that I've actually covered in the past in other videos. But as far as measuring and cutting decking, I've never done that. So this is a video that I've wanted to do for a while. Just needed to get to this stage to have a reason to do it. And this rear end rebuild was a perfect opportunity. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. We'll see you on the next one. As always, may your tiny boat builds be great.